Welcome to the Technology Alchemist, your source for technology advice, strategic technology planning, technology coaching, time-saving advice, and a pragmatic look at increasing revenue and profit through your technology engine. I'm your host, the Technology Alchemist himself, Mike Mahoney. Today, our sponsor is VP Virtual Assistants. When you need someone to help with the workload, VP Virtual Assistants can help you out. Schedule a call or send in your needs at vpvirtualassistants.com/contact. Now, our guest today is Roy Barker. He is an employee retention strategist and has spent his career working with businesses of all types to improve their employee retention. Roy also has a bunch of great stories that he can tell us. So welcome to the show, Roy.
And thank you, Mike. Thank you, Michael. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. It's right after Labor Day weekend, so I'm feeling nice and relaxed.
All right. Well, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So tell me what got you started with employee retention. Like what made you focus in on that?
Well, I was a late bloomer in life, and so I didn't go back to grad school till way as an adult. I had got my undergrad in finance, and we started consulting with senior living communities. Back in that day, usually they owner operators and maybe had one or two places, but as the message to me was, well, you're kind of a numbers jumper guy. You don't know anything about our business. So I said, okay, great. So I went back to grad school and I got a gerontology degree, which with that and $6, you can still stop by Starbucks and get a cup of coffee. But what that is, it's the study of aging, and it's the track that people take to be licensed nursing home administrators. And we were reading through a book, and they pointed out that some long-term care facilities, more in the nursing home realm, have over 300% turnover. And I didn't really understand that. I grew up in AT&T, and people there stayed for life. Nobody ever quit. I think I was the only person that ever really left to go do something else. And so when I read that, started thinking about all this, I thought, wow, that's a huge problem, because even with some lower wage individuals, the cost per turnover can be between $3,500 and $6,000 per person, real cash out the door. Not only that, but just the disruption to the organization. So anyway, it was a big revelation for me. And so I started looking at some companies I was working with, and these are more like assisted living, not quite as high of care need, but they were all having 125% turnover with their employees. And so that's kind of what got me interested, because it's the usual response to a large problem is, I don't worry about it. We've always done it this way. It's always been this way, always be this way. There were some bigger companies that came in and showed with education and starting to hire people right, they moved that down from almost the triple digits way down into the upper teens, lower 20s. So, there was empirical evidence that it could be done.
That's very cool. So how are they managing? I mean, with 125% turnover, how are they managing to even stay in business?
Yeah, it's amazing, because, and what tipped me off too was one of the first meetings I was with after I figured this out, saw this high number. I was sitting with the CEO, and we were doing a remote with one of his people about just about their monthly business. And he said, "Oh, I'm so excited. I hired 15 people this month." And I almost fell out of my chair, and I held up a sign to the CEO. I'm like, how can one guy hire 15 people in a month? I usually have some marketing help or some research help. Takes me 2 or 3 weeks to hire that person. And, I feel like I want to jump out the window. Luckily, I'm on the first floor, but, I just want to jump through the window when I have to hire somebody. And my point is, you can hire 15 people, but you can't hire 15 quality people in that amount of time. And anyway, it was just, it's unbelievable, but they struggled. They struggle financially because of overtime. And then if you're the new guy, and your partner, or somebody in your area is gone, and you're having to pull overtime, it wears you out, number one. But number two, that's one thing is in that business, that is where it's most critical of abuse type situations, maybe not physical, but verbal. When people have worked 2 or 3 shifts, they're worn out, they just, were to their wits' end, and that's when bad stuff happens. So again, it's not all monetary, but it's, it's internal to the companies, because other people get tired of pulling these other shifts. And then even if we get into other businesses, I'm very suspect when I come into your business 5 times and I have to deal with 5 different people. It makes me wonder, what's going on here.
Yeah, I actually, I have something I teach my coaching clients, and that is hire slow, fire fast.
Exactly.
And essentially I'm trying to say, take your sweet time hiring people so that you hire the right people. But if they're not working out, get rid of them as fast as you can.
Right.
I think too often, it's funny, I just read, I've picked up again reading the Daily Drucker, and he has a thing in there about developing your people today. And he makes the comment that you should focus on their strengths and then set high expectations based off of those strengths, because you can't change their personality.
Right.
But his point is, though, that if you set those high expectations and they don't meet them, then they need to go and you move on to someone else. And by focusing on their strengths and setting high expectations, well, you're just focusing on performance. So potential doesn't play into it, none of that plays into it. So like, how do you, what do you do? So you have a client like that, and they're obviously, the problem's super obvious if they're hiring 15 people that quickly. Nobody can do that. I mean,
right.
that's one every 2 days. That's one person every 2 days, and that has to include interview time. So I don't see how they did that.
Yeah. And that's one guy. I mean, it's not like he had a team of HR people. It was, the manager for that location. So he did that all by himself. But yeah, I think we coming through the, I'm so old. I remember when there was the .com boom, back in the day. And I think that we got in such a habit of saying, well, if we throw a ping pong table at them, or a pool table, or if we put a tap, where they can drink some beer after work, then that solves all of our retention issues. And I guess what I have found through time is really it doesn't. It makes bad people stay around longer because they love drinking your free beer after work. And then we also have people with poor attitudes that, it's a poor attitude is like a virus. It'll infect everybody in the organization. So what I try to focus on is getting back to the basics at the beginning and hiring right. And, one of my bigger objections today is that we think that recruiting is putting an ad up on Indeed. And there's so much more to recruiting, to getting it right and getting the right people in place than putting an ad. Because the other thing an ad does is, if you put an ad up at any kind of a decent wage, you'll probably get 3,000 or 4,000 responses to it from every industry, nobody that actually has experience that you're looking for. And so we make a lot of busy work for our HR people, trying to cull through all of these as well.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work in the, in the corporate world, and that was always a huge issue that we had to deal with, was retention. Because I was running IT department, and the company that I worked for, it didn't really value their technology employees as much as other employees, and so the budget I was given for payroll was super low. And we were taught to use a system called top grading, wherein we would find the top 10% of the people in the pool of possible hires that are willing to take that salary and have the skills to do the job. Right. But theoretically that will work. But what I found with tech professionals was they would take the job just to tide themselves over, and then they'd continue to interview and they'd find a much right. higher paying job. So retention started to become a problem for me, because I'm spending all this time and money training people only to lose them. And I finally was able to show, I got the HR director on my side, and I was able to show her, look, this guy came here, he came in at 70K. He took a job a month later at 110K. Why do you think he was able to get the job at 110K? Because he's worth 110K. And then I spent this much money training him. So maybe my salary budgets should be a little higher so that I can attract the right people that want to stay here. And that actually solved my problem. When she upped the budget a bit, Pay was the problem. They were leaving because of pay. But what are some common things that you see that cause high turnover rate?
Well, like I said, I think first off, hiring the wrong individual, not having a good onboarding process, because there are a lot of times that, I've talked to people, I've talked to the employee side where it's like, they came in first day of work and got met at the door. Guy said, "Let me walk you to your cube," set them down and said, "Somebody will be with you and bring you a computer sometime today, we hope." And that was the onboarding process. There was no, "Hey, welcome to the company. Let me show you around." There was no, "Here's our handbook. Here's how you sign up for insurance. Here's how you do all this stuff." And so to me, that's that's a big red flag starting right off. So we could back up just a little bit and say that, screening is that, especially in the senior living industry, everybody loves their own grandma, but you taking care of my grandma like you take care of yours is a different thing. And so there needs to be some type of screening before we even make it to the interview. And each industry, has their own specifics that they may want to screen for, tech especially. But you have some method where we can do a little bit of screen to make sure that they are even suited for this employment. Because if I'm hiring you for inside sales, but you're the guy that likes to be out running around knocking on doors and talking to people, you're probably going to get very disappointed after a while at sitting at this desk, dialing over and over again. And if you're a real people person, maybe you need a job with more people interaction. So we need to make sure that people are suited for these jobs before we put them in the chair. But then, we need to have a very thoughtful interview process. And it depends on the level. I realize that as we climb the ladder, we probably need to have a couple more interviews. But, if you're hiring like an entry level staff position, and even some of these, like the caregiver positions, those people don't give their 2 weeks notice. Usually they quit yesterday and they're looking for a job today. So you don't have 3 weeks to go through the hiring cycle in order to get them on board. I mean, you have to cut that down to as short a time as you can to pick them up, or they're going to do what you said. They'll be in your process for a while, but they're waiting until the other guy hires them out from under you. And then there you go. When it's like, "Hey, I want you to come in," like, "Well, I've already gone somewhere else," because they were a lot quicker at, from application to the hiring process. So, those are all areas that definitely need to be smoothed out, and then we get on down to like, training. Even though you did the same job at a different company, our systems are different processes, procedures need to be indoctrinated to all that in the new company to make sure that people understand. And then ongoing training, and I know you said you were spending a lot of money training and only to see people leave, but it's still an important part. I think that if we get the salary close and we make all other things being equal, we have to provide them with training, a path of promotion. People want to do better. They want to take on more responsibility. So finding out ways, maybe we could do that, special projects, provide them challenges through this, and then also develop this talent from inside the company to be promotion. Not, sometimes we do have to go outside and hire in, but if you've got somebody that you can develop them into one of your leaders, you'll be far ahead of the game.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that like in our business, my wife runs a virtual assistant agency, so it helps me with my staffing needs because I can just pull from her group. And one of the hard lessons she had to learn from the very beginning was exactly what you talked about a little while ago: assessments, making sure that she assesses people. How do you find it? Like if you're hiring somebody who's claiming that they're a graphic designer, let's say, and they send you a portfolio, how do you find out if that's really their portfolio? Maybe ask them to do something super simple for you. Like, I want I want you to create an image that has like a circle and a triangle in it, you know, something that they wouldn't be able to just pull off of the internet, and
Right.
then have them provide it to you as like a test. I know, like, it's a tough scenario though, because like with technologists, if I get somebody that sends me a resume like mine, I have 30 years of experience in technology. I personally find it insulting when they say, "Oh, we have a coding test for you to do," because it's sort of ridiculous. Like you can call all of the people I've worked with, and they'll all tell you, "Oh yeah, he knows how to do that work."
Right.
But I think with a younger, you know, more junior developer, a coding test is important because it may not disqualify them from the job, but at least it tells you, what am I getting into here? If I hire this person, am I willing to do the training that's required? And that's one of the things my wife's learned with her virtual assistant agency is, in the beginning, they were more of like the people who were in the background doing the tasks, and then she would review them and provide them to the client. But as she scaled up, she needed those people to work directly with the client. And that's when she had to change her approach to hiring, because she needed to have people who could communicate with the client in a way that she would communicate with the client.
Right.
So like, do you ever deal with virtual virtual employees like that, where they're offsite, and you know, and how do you advise people to say, like, for instance, I'll kind of frame it this way. People always say like, um what's the word I'm thinking of now? The environment matters. So culture matters.
Yes.
How do people set up a culture within their company that keeps employees who are not actually working in a physical location?
Yeah, it's you have to be creative, but you have to pay attention. You can't just you know, a lot of times we just leave them alone and we have no communication. So communication, if you're at least in the same town, you know, through this virus, you know, one thing people might do is they would set up a one-on-one at a coffee shop. So maybe the boss and the employee could meet somewhere. If it's, you know, if there's a huge geographical difference, then obviously that won't work. But I think just having that FaceTime, you know, literally, I guess, you know, through Zoom or Teams or however you can see each other, talking about the projects, staying engaged, making sure they're engaged. And then, you know, also the productivity, you have to monitor that, because we can't wait until productivity falls completely off the map and then start investigating something. And it's difficult can be very difficult to manage people off site. And that's, again, this gets back to the hiring. Are people suited for that? You know, what is their true environment that they live in? Are they, you know, trying to do this in a crowded house where it's always noisy and busy and they can't concentrate? Do they have that place that's segregated where they can actually, you know, more of a workspace where they can get things done? It's that makes it really, it's tricky. There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's interesting because, like, I feel like for the types of things that we're using our virtual assistants for, their work environment matters a little less to me. Their flexibility is what matters more. But
Yeah.
we've been talking about, like we brought on an operations manager, and one of the first things that I said to her was that when we hire you, you're like, I want to see like video of your workspace, like where are you working? And I told her flat out, I don't want to see your couch. Like, that's not what I want to see. I want to
Right.
see that you have a place where you're working. And she was like, well, why do you care where I work? And I said, because, you know, you're a full-time employee. We're paying you a salary. I want to make sure that you're going to be in the most productive environment you can be in. And if you're not, the company will help you get that set up.
Right.
And to us, that's kind of the way we um, push our culture is, we, you know, both my wife and I, we work here at home, but we have office space.
Yeah.
So, and like mine, hers is actually part of our bedroom, but mine is actually a dedicated office.
Right.
And productivity is great because no one bothers me. I don't have a desk phone. I can turn the cell phone off if I want to. And I want that for my full-time employees. Like I said, my contractors, I kind of feel like they're contractors for a reason. They want that freedom. And if they want to work at a coffee shop or whatnot, they're going to suffer their productivity issues a little bit,
Yeah.
but at least it's better than like laying back on your couch and thinking you're getting work done, because you're
Right.
not. You're
Right.
going to wake up later and find out that your laptop's crashed on the floor and you just slept for 2 hours and missed a deadline or something.
Yeah.
So okay. One last question and then we'll wrap this up. what is your ideal strategy for making sure that the employees you hire stick around long term?
Well, I think we just get back to, hiring right. First off, I advise people that you can't just sit around and fling out some Indeed ads. You need to, been harder through COVID for sure, but we need to be reaching out. We need to actually talk to people. We need to follow them on social media, on LinkedIn, see what kind of, messages are they putting out, have more interaction. We need to sell the company. I always talk about that. We need to market for talent, just like we market for customers. And so we want to create an environment where there are people reaching out to contacts in our company saying, "Hey, y'all got anything open? I am looking." And that way you turn this around, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work, but once you get that set up, you get to choose who you want, not the other way around. One thing I always tell people is you want to be an employer of choice, not an employer of last resort. And sometimes I feel like when we're just putting things out on Indeed, we don't know about that. The guy that you talked about, we don't know that this guy operates at $110,000 level, and we just hired him for 70, because it could be the other guy that's operating at that $40,000 level that we've just hired in for 70. And then having to separate with somebody is a much more difficult process. And so that's the other thing about getting to know people somewhat before the actual hire, taking the time to do the screening and, just get out in front of it. Because once we get those, and I like to hire for attitude. Most jobs I have, not like coding and some specific accounting, things like that. But for a lot of tasks, you can hire people with a good attitude and you can teach them how to do it, because I've seen some very qualified, high skilled individuals that have come in and destroyed a department because, again, of their attitude. So very important to keep an eye on that.
I totally agree with that. I'll tell you a little story. I used to, when my oldest son was like 7 years old, I used to coach roller hockey, and they used to do a draft every year. And so I am a new coach coming in there. And what I observed, he played for 2 years before I became a coach. And what I would observe is the parents who took their kids to practice and the parents who didn't. And when I was going through the draft, I drafted kids who I thought were the most skilled, but who also had parents that took them to practice. And
Right.
Guys laughed at me. And you could have drafted this guy. Why didn't you draft this guy? Well, because his parents never taken him to practice. Why would I want to draft him? Oh, but he's so skilled. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Long and short of it, we won like 4 championships in a row because I didn't necessarily have all of the best players, but I had all of the coachable players.
Exactly.
And so you could teach them your way of doing things and victory, right? And I think it's the same with employees. If you hire for attitude, someone who's coachable and teachable, then you can teach them virtually anything. Our operations manager, we moved her up from contractor rank because of how teachable she was on things. And she's the type of person that when she makes a mistake and you talk to her about it, that mistake never happens again. Like, she puts processes in place to make sure that whatever caused her to make that mistake, it won't happen again. And that's the kind of people you want, right? Like, because especially you want them to stick around a long time, but if they're going to stick around a long time, they also need to be employees that are doing the job. So that's great. I think that's great advice that everyone should listen to. So why don't you let my listeners know where they can find you, and if they need help with this, they can reach out to you.
Yeah, certainly. Y'all can just reach out to, it's roybarker.com, and got a lot of information over there that you can look through. You could also send me an email. I'll be glad to, chat with you. I usually like to talk to, this is information, very passionate about it. So don't mind having a conversation, just see what we can do.
Great. Well, I'll put that in the show notes. And
Okay.
Thanks so much for being on. It's enlightening. I mean, HR is an area that most entrepreneurs that start a business know nothing about, and they learn about it as they go. So people like you are super big help. So thanks everyone for listening to another episode of The Technology Alchemists.